Well, when I said something about one of the greatest actors of our time, did you really think these would be what was staring right before you? Come on, he gets way too much, like, heel heat in the world. He really does. I mean, Nicolas Cage is a really good actor, and we're going to explain why in this versus battle between something that we don't really do very often, but something that does come up every once in a while, and that is the original versus the remake. And we're going to see what happens when the Wicker Man battles itself.
The original versus remake is something I generally wanted to stay away from
Yes.
entirely, but there's a particular reason these two can be compared without necessarily comparing them as this is what the remake did better, or this is what the original did better. Because they're pretty different
Yes.
while being the exact same movie. But I will gradually make my way to that point. We're actually going to start with the 73 version and talk about it.
Okay.
It's basically considered there's an ongoing debate about whether or not it's a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that say, oh, it's not a horror movie, it's like a mystery and suspense, and it's, doesn't have any blood or booze or anything. I think it's absolutely a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just got this really creepy, eerie atmosphere.
Horrific things happen to people in this movie.
And it's just got this constant, no matter what's happening. Okay, let me go into the story. Basically, Edward Woodward is a cop who gets an anonymous letter to come to this island, Summer Isle, and look for a girl that's gone missing, Rowan. So he shows up, and immediately he's rejected. He's trying to get a dinghy so he can get off the boat, and they're basically saying this is private property, you must go. But then when he says who he is and who he's looking for, they immediately switch tone, and they're like, oh, and then they bring him in. And then he meets this creepy ass town of people that just seem isolated from everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something off about them clearly, but he can't quite figure it out. He just knows that basically everybody's playing dumb, and it seems like everybody knows where this girl is or what happened to her, and that he might be the center of a giant ruse.
Mm-hmm.
Played on him by the entire town of people, literally. Which is a creepy setup in itself. And of course, throughout the movie, he makes it a point that he is engaged to be married, and he doesn't think that things should be done until after you're married.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that this, you'll see on the cover that Leonard Maltin, one of the words he uses to describe this movie is erotic. Basically, they're constantly trying to lead him in with temptation, like with Britt Ekland's character, who is the landlord's daughter, in a weird, creepy musical segment, where she tries to lure him into her room. Obviously, they're basically... apparently there's a lot of theories on why they're trying to take advantage of the fact that he is a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Which could be, they're testing whether or not he's as pure as he says he is, because his purity could potentially be important to them for a certain reason. So, and it just gets weirder and weirder as it goes. One thing that's really interesting about it that a lot of people probably don't realize, especially if they only know the remake, on top of being a genre-bending mystery/horror movie, the original Wicker Man is also a really bizarre musical of folk music. With songs ranging from kids being taught reincarnation to erotic sexual things. So, and there's this scene in the school where they're being taught. A lot of people thought this was weird in the remake, but it's actually a scene right out of the original, where all the girls in school are being taught about the phallic symbol and how it's this horrible thing you must avoid. Another thing that adds to the creepiness is the fact the masks, the hair masks, and the cake shop where they have basically the cakes that we actually see cut up and eaten are in the shape of babies for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this particularly really creepy scene where he learns that Rowan may or may not be dead. So he goes to her gravesite, and it looks like a red ribbon, like tied around a branch near her grave, on top of her grave. And the caretaker's there, and he's one of those creepy guys that's just kind of there with the shovel and watching and giggling. And he takes the red ribbon and he's asking, what is it? It looks like it's skin or something. And just very casually, like it's nothing weird whatsoever, the caretaker laughs and says, well, it is skin. It's, her, he calls it her navel string. So, yes. And that's basically how this movie brings about its qualities of being really bizarre and weird in the most effectively creepy way possible. Which is why I absolutely definitely think there's no mistaking the fact that it's a horror movie. Mm-hmm. It's just not necessarily a conventional one. And then, of course, we have this this one scene that really stands out. Mind you, we learned that it's not what it seems, but it still makes me nervous every time. There's this really memorable scene that's just makes you sweat every time you watch it, where they do this, it's part of the ritual when they're on their way to the Wicker Man. When they're like doing their little parade right out of a Bergman movie. It's a very, very Bergman-like movie, which really helps in the creepiness factor. One of the parts of the ritual is, you remember that game that you would play in school where two kids would like make a bridge with their arms and the music would be playing and the line would walk in between them, and when the music stopped, your arms would come down and whoever was trapped in it was done. Mm-hmm. They play this game during the ritual, but instead of two people using their arms, they make the symbol of the sun in swords, and your head goes up through the hole, and when the music stops, you get decapitated. Like I said, the scene doesn't exactly go that way, but just the lead into it is... And the one time where Edward Ward's gone into disguise by now. No, it's not a bear suit. It's like a deformed jester outfit. It's like a court jester, and then it's like a deformed Eyes Wide Shut mask. And he gets put under there. He gets pulled in by Christopher Lee. He's tried to avoid it, but nevertheless, he gets out fine for now. And now we're on him now, talking about Christopher Lee. He's for a while before it was even remade, and it was just this cult British horror movie. Christopher Lee was the reason people remembered it, because he's Lord Summerisle. He's basically the leader, and he runs everything. The interesting thing about his performance, number one, he loved doing the movie so much. I don't know if he actually did it for free, but he did, say he wanted to do it for free. I think he might actually have. This was before SAG rules, I think. And his character is actually... He said it was his absolute favorite character he's ever played. And Christopher Lee's been in 300 movies. And that's not even a number I'm pulling out. He's literally been in 300 movies. He said this was absolutely his favorite character he ever played. And he's still alive. I don't know why I'm talking in past tense. And he's such a... The interesting thing is he's so memorable and makes such an impression. You don't even remember the fact that he's actually in it very little. Mm-hmm. He's in it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But he made such an impression. He's like, this is like one of the performances everybody remembers him for, and what everybody thinks of when they think of the movie itself. And he's so mysterious and calm, despite everything. Like when Woodward's telling him everything that's going on, and he's just, just kind of casually taking it in. And then there's at one point where obviously Woodward is this very sheltered Christian, and he sees, and there's all kinds of like sexual rituals going on and like nudity all around the island. And there's this particular scene where there's a bunch of naked teenagers like running in a circle, and there's a circle of fire. And Woodward's just outraged, and he's like, there are children, and they are dancing naked out there. Why are the children naked? And Christopher Lee just really calmly thinks about it and goes, well, it's much too dangerous to jump through a hoop of fire in your clothes. And it's just a great character, even though he's only there for like 10 minutes. The impression is definitely there. He's got the fucking hair and everything. It's just this really... He just adds to the whole creepiness factor. They couldn't have cast a better person to be the head of every weird fucking thing you see in this movie. I guess I should probably mention that there's like 4 or 5 different cuts of this movie that exist, which has been a problem for some people. The problem with it is the cut you're looking for is the hour 42 version. This one is the 88-minute version, but it's pretty much the only one you can find without having to go online. That's how I ended up with it. There's one that's like 95 minutes, but the one that's an hour 42 is basically, I think, the definitive one now. I think they had an anniversary recently, and they basically made it the official version, where it's got some extra scenes, and the scenes are in a different order, and it makes it more cohesive. Like in this cut, the scenes are actually like not in chronological order, but you can't really tell that unless you know the order they're supposed to be in. And it makes it like you can tell where like the chops are. Like some of the songs get abruptly cut off. It just has a much better flow to it. So if you're gonna watch it like for the first time, I strongly recommend you find the definitive version. It's like 102 minutes. So, and we also get some backstory on Woodward's character, like when he was a preacher. So, yeah, that's the version I would look for, if you can find it. It was on, I think a DVD exists that has both versions on it, or whichever version. I think there's the most, I don't know how popular the 90-minute version was. I think the main ones are this 88-minute version one and the 102-minute version one. So a problem would be probably the main problem this movie would have is the fact that it's probably one of the best horror movies ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so creepy and effective for its time. I think still. But the problem is, and the comment on the back of this DVD case calls it the Citizen Kane of horror movies. I don't think it would be taken seriously with today's audiences.
Probably not.
I don't think a modern audience would take to it at all, really. So, what I think happened here was Neil LaBute said, there is no way a modern audience is going to buy this. They're just going to laugh at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't we just take it and make the craziest, most absurdly idiotic comedy we can possibly think. So, that's what I think is the misconception that happened with the remake that Neil LaBute made in 2006 with Nicolas Cage. Because here's the thing. When this came out, it basically blew up into this internet phenomenon, and everybody thought the movie was hilarious. Unintentionally. Well, number one, apparently Cage was at a Comic-Con recently, and somebody asked him about it. And he said he thought it was made abundantly clear that he and Neil LaBute intentionally made an absurd comedy out of the horror subject. So according to... Now, Cage could have just been covering his ass and not saying, you know, it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. Or he's telling the truth, and all this time it was supposed to be funny. And here is why I buy it. Obviously the director, and I think he co-wrote it too, is Neil LaBute, who did In the Company of Men, Your Friends and Neighbors, Nurse Betty, and I think The Shape of Things. When you look at these, The Wicker Man seems like a weird choice. Because what his other movies, In the Company of Men, Nurse Betty, Your Friends and Neighbors, and The Shape of Things have in common is they're all really dark, sick, twisted comedies.
Mm-hmm.
So it really only makes sense that The Wicker Man kind of falls right into that. Because, in case you don't know, I'll go ahead and tell you. Just to name off a couple, In the Company of Men is about two misogynists, one extreme misogynist and his friend that work in an office. And they're basically so tired of women, they're going to track down... They have this deaf girl that works in their office as a secretary, or whatever she is. So basically, just to get revenge on the female gender in general, they're going to take this deaf girl and basically intentionally ruin her life. Just because. And the movie's a comedy. And Nurse Betty. Nurse Betty is about Renee Zellweger, who is a nurse that has an extremely unhealthy obsession with a soap opera. And she ends up being chased by two hitmen, one of which scalped her husband in front of her. And the movie ends in a bloodbath of a shootout. That movie is also a comedy. So, and there's a scene in Your Friends and Neighbors, which is also a comedy, which is a movie about everybody fucking each other's wife, and Jason Patric tells a story about how he basically raped a dude. That is also a comedy. So, I honestly find it extremely easy to buy that this guy would see The Wicker Man and see a comedy in it.
Yeah.
And when you watch the movie and you see it from that perspective, it makes you see it in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Because when everybody saw The Wicker Man, they thought, well, this movie's really bad and it's really dumb and oh my god, it's hilarious for all the wrong reasons. When you look at it, does it not come off so bad? It has to be on purpose.
Mm.
It seriously just has to be. Like something that never... First off, the plot is a little different. Obviously, the cop in The Wicker Man is played by Edward Woodward, who basically played a part in Hot Fuzz, and Hot Fuzz took a lot of inspiration from The Wicker Man, you can tell.
Mm.
Cage's first name in the movie is Edward. Oh, and not to mention Britt Eklund, the landlord's daughter that tries to tempt him, is named Willow. So you watch the remake, and Cage's name is Edward, and his ex-fiancée, who's on the island, which is now called Summers Isle, which they put an S in it for some reason. Her name is Willow Woodward. And it's her daughter that's missing. And she sends him the letter because the daughter might be his. So he goes there, and he has a past, of course. He has that cliche past. Once again, that may have been LaBute saying, let's have fun with the cliche past thing, because that's something the other character didn't have. So they have this scene where he tracks down this girl. He's riding behind this station wagon, and the girl throws her doll out the window, and he scoops up the doll while he's driving by on the motorcycle. And this ends with them being crushed by a semi-truck and exploding. Spontaneously. So throughout the movie, he keeps having these flashes of this girl getting hit by this truck, even when he's on a boat. There is no possible way that is not supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
And they even play with that some more with, they do one of those fake out scenes where it's only a dream twice. And it's clear they're not doing it for effect. They're doing it to basically make a satire of it. Mm-hmm. Because it's basically, what basically happened here was it's like Neil LaBute watched the original Wicker Man and then said, wouldn't it be fucking hilarious if we got Nicolas Cage's reaction to all this shit? So he goes into I'll get to the fake out in a minute. He goes to the school. In the original movie, it's the exact same scene. The whose desk is that? And they say it's no one, so he goes over and he lifts up the desk. In the original, it's a beetle and a nail. They basically nailed the nail into the desk and they've wrapped a string around it, and then they tied the string to the beetle, so that when the beetle wraps himself up in it, he basically kills himself. In the remake, there's a fucking crow in there that just flies out for a jump scare. It flies out for this big jump scare, and Cage's reaction is, what? How is this not intentionally funny?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then there's this other scene where they do the double fake out, where he's underground, and he sees the girl and she's drowned. And he picks her up and he goes to save her. But then he wakes up and he's on the dock. And he's like, oh my God, thank God it was just a dream. And then he looks down and there she is in his arms and it's another dream. And then he wakes up on the dock again. And when he wakes up the second time, he just goes, God damn it! It's hilarious. And I think that's on purpose. I really do. So, yeah, if you're, and it also helps that, in the original, the cop is basically, doesn't take shit. Like, he's just, if something's bizarre, he's gonna call it out. If something needs to be investigated, he'll investigate it. Cage's character is the worst cop in the entire world. One of the most infamous scenes that YouTube has now made infamous is he first arrives, and for some reason one of the big changes they made was the island is run completely by women now. There's not a guy in sight. They say it might be the misogynist thing he started with In the Company of Men for later use. And they're holding this bag that has blood in it. And it's in the shape of a body. So they walk up and he stops them. And they're like, okay, let's find out what this is. Well, Cage's initial response is the famous, incomprehensible line, what have you got in the bag? A shark or something? And then they scare him with the bag. But he still doesn't see what's in the bag. The bag is dripping blood. It could have anything in it. And after they scare him and laugh at him, he walks away. No more investigation necessary here.
Nope.
And not to mention the fact that we're investigating the disappearance of a girl. So when he finds Willow, they basically catch up and they do dialogue and they do whatever. Well, eventually, Willow shows him the last place she saw Rowan before she disappeared. Willow shows Edward the last place she saw Rowan before she disappeared halfway into the movie. He didn't ask for this until now. And it's just, seriously, what the Wicker Man remake is, it's not a remake, it's basically a spoof. It's basically, the Wicker Man is basically, it still stands, as one of the creepiest movies ever made. But as far as modern audiences go, they're not going to take to it. They're going to just laugh at it. So why don't we beat them to the punch and make it a comedy with all these cliches thrown into it that basically make a satire of the horror genre. So they're taking a movie that's basically always debated as to whether or not it is a horror movie. And they put all of the hilarious cliches in it. And that's what happened. So, yeah. And I would say, okay, let's talk about the ending now. The ending of the original movie is this big, dramatic thing where it's finally revealed, and it's really, really just freaky the way it all plays out. When Woodward finally realizes, when he first sees the Wicker Man, just Woodward's acting here is just makes the whole scene. It's scary as fuck when we see the Wicker Man for the first time, and his mind starts to put together what it's going to be used for. And so they put him in it with a bunch of animals, and he says this big prayer, and he basically begs God for his life right before he burns to death. And then the last shot of the movie is this really great shot of a sunset as the Wicker Man crumbles out of the frame. And then the credits roll over the sunset. And it's worth noting, it's a great thing they did the jester suit, because it's the whole when they surround him and he realizes what's going on, he's in the jester outfit, blatantly labeling him the fool and all of this.
Nice.
It's perfect symbolism. The bear suit in its place. Now let's also talk about the fact right before the bear suit, when these women have been pissing him off through the whole movie. Now, Woodward has a similar scene where he says, stay out of my way. And he gets pissed off and charges and does what he needs to do. What Cage's character does is he starts to beat the shit out of the women in the island. The one scene where he punches her in the face and knocks her flat out, and then Lily Sobieski comes down and he kicks her against the wall. He kicks her and she flies across the room against the wall. How did people not realize this was a spoof?
Yeah.
And then he gets the bear suit, and he knocks somebody else out in it, by the way. I believe he goes on a bike ride on the bear suit as well. And then finally he gets there, and we have Ellen Burstyn as Summers Isle in this one. And she, Christopher Lee just looked like himself. Mm-hmm. They put Braveheart makeup on Ellen Burstyn for some reason. And they turned it into a thing about bees and honey. In the original, it was, they had to sacrifice him so their crops would grow. Because they say, obviously, he's a Christian. He's like, this will never work. I will be resurrected and stuff like that. And they believe in reincarnation, so they say, and they sing this song through the whole movie talking about reincarnation. That's what they teach the children. You don't realize exactly how literal they mean it until the end of the movie, and it makes it even creepier when you go back and realize that. Their belief is when somebody dies, they'll be buried, and then a tree will be planted in their grave, and they'll be the tree, and then they have apples. Well, and like I said, the bees and honey thing, whatever that was. Of course, the famous line is, killing me won't bring back your apples. Which, of course, in the Wicker Man the Wicker Man remake was changed to, killing me won't bring back your goddamn money. So, after the horrifying ending of the original movie, we have the scene where they break Cage's legs. We know this because we hear breaking sounds and Cage screaming, "My legs! You're breaking my legs!" And then, of course, it's the most famous scene in the movie, and it's not even in the original cut. But if you've seen the unrated version, or you've seen it on YouTube enough times, you know about the scene where earlier in the movie, Cage talks about being allergic to bees because he kills one of them on the desk, and it shocks the fuck out of everybody. They basically put this mask over his head, and they drop a shitload of bees onto his face. Everybody knows the scene. Everything possible has been done to that scene. And then they put him in the Wicker Man, and he's still screaming all the way to his death. He doesn't do the prayer or the quoting or anything like that. He just screams his Nicolas Cage scream until it's over. And for some reason, we have an epilogue where it turns out this is a common thing, and Louis Sobieski and the other girl are in a bar and they're attracting men. For some reason, this called for a cameo from Jason Ritter and James Franco. And it ends on a cliffhanger that this is going to happen again.
It's like Hostel.
Yeah, further going with the horror movie cliches that they throw in on purpose. You have to end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So, that's the difference. Okay. Oh man, I didn't even bring up How to Get Burned. Just so many quotable lines from it that will be the height of hilarity from the beginning of time. This movie is more quotable than a Judd Apatow movie. But here's the thing, okay? Some people did. If you saw the Wicker Man remake as a horror movie and you liked it, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfectly fine. But here's what I'm asking. Even if you did like it as a horror movie and it affected you, go back and watch it again with the idea that it's a spoof. And you'll see a whole different movie. And you'll be entertained by it in a whole different way. It especially helps if you've seen the original. Then you really get the parody of it. So yeah, you could argue that's not the case. Because Cage said they did set out to make an absurd comedy. But it's never really like 100% been absolutely confirmed that it was a parody of the original movie instead of a remake. But I strongly believe that that is the case. And I don't think it's that bad. There's no way a movie could be that bad on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Or without being on purpose. So, or made intentionally to get laughs. And I think that went over a lot of people's heads. So, or I could be wrong and Cage and Neil Abute are full of shit and are trying to cover up the fact that they made a shitty movie, but personally I like to believe this is a horror movie, this is a comedic parody. And both of them are effective on both levels of it. Obviously, if I was going to watch one for quality, naturally it would be the original. Because like I said, it's one of the best horror movies ever made. So, and effective. But like I said, modern audiences may not take to it anymore. But I still think it works. So, that's pretty much the difference between these two.
All right. Well, that's really not much to say more after that. I will say that next week is kind of a question mark at this point.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So, go watch the Wicker Man remake again and enjoy it as a dark comedy.
And find the original if you can. Just give it a try at least.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I think that's it for this.